Hello everyone and welcome to another amazing game from the Champions Chess Tour. This time it is Magnus Carlsen playing against Jan-Krzysztof Duda. If you haven't seen the previous video where Duda really played one of the best games ever against Benjamin Bok, do check it out before checking out this one. So now he faces Magnus Carlsen, which is never a simple task, regardless of the time format, regardless of the chess format, regardless pretty much of anything that you can think of. Magnus is just Magnus. So let's see what happens in this one, and well, how the players are able to just go from one opening to the other, from one system to another, and just find their way around pretty much anything. So let's see. Pawn to d4 by Magnus, we have knight to f6 by Jan-Krzysztof, pawn to c4, pawn to e6, and knight to f3. The anti-Nimzo, stopping bishop to b4. Not really, you can still play it and go into the Bogo Indian defense, but it's not quite the same. So he transposes pawn to d5 into the Queen's Gambit declined, and Magnus goes pawn to g3. He opts for the Catalan opening. We have d captures on c4, bishop to g2, and now bishop to b4 with check, knight to c3, transposing into the Ragozin defense, and now after castling kingside, we are in the Romanichin-Kasparov system of the Nimzo Indian defense. We have castles kingside, knight to c6, and pawn to a3. Challenging the bishop, which is pretty standard in the Nimzo, bishop back to e7 and pawn to e4. Okay, Magnus now claims the full center, and Jan-Krzysztof plays pawn to a6, announcing that he's ready to maybe play pawn to b5. Later on, even if e5 is played and this opens up, you can maybe put a knight on d5, which is, again, pretty standard if you play the Catalan. But although it's a fairly common position, bishop to e3 is the most played move here. For example, Rajabov played against Aronian, Pregnananda played it against Gukesh, pawn to h4 by Magnus. And it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game. Okay, Duda plays pawn to b5. He says, no problem, execute e5 if you want. Magnus does so, and knight to d5. It's not a problem, the knight is defended twice, so the bishop never really truly comes alive. I mean, it is alive, it's just not going to win any material, but even if you could, even though, okay, this is the Nimzo, this is the Catalan bishop. The Catalan bishop, you don't trade the Catalan bishop for a rook. I mean, you trade it for a victory. That's what you give up the Catalan bishop for. So knight to g5, and already you can see that while Magnus isn't objectively better, he's doing something that you usually cannot do. You have a knight on g5, defended twice, and you have a beautiful Catalan bishop. The queen can easily come into the game, and it's something that Magnus even made a course on. He calls it attacking without sacrificing, and usually to get an attack going, you have to sacrifice something, at least a pawn. But no, Magnus, just builds up an attack out of nothing. We have pawn to h6. You don't have to play it, but well, queen will come to h5, you're gonna play it either way, so you might as well do it right away. Pawn to h6, and now not back to f3 or even e4, Magnus goes knight to h3, announcing that he is coming to f4 at some point in the future. We have knight to a5, now making room for the c-pawn. Also, this knight is coming to b3, but now he is in problems, and this is what I mean when I say the Magnus understands chess better than an engine. The move that Magnus plays, the engine says it's not very good, that it's sort of an equal position. The engine gives queen h5 as advantageous for white, but then after a couple of precise moves by black, it decides that, okay, it's not really that spectacular. So I'm just going to show it to you. For example, pawn to c6, and when I say something like this, I always analyze games to about depth 50. c6, bishop captures on h6, and that's kind of the theme here. Of course, we have to sacrifice this bishop, captures, and now pawn to f5, and black is having a very good time here. Not much for white to do here. For example, you could eliminate the knight, and after c captures, go queen g6 with check, king to h8, and now knight to f4, but there is a very clever way that black can defend, and that is rook to a7. And now after, if you try knight to h5, you could go for knight captures on e6, it's also fine. I mean, it's an equal position, but after knight h5, sort of threatening checkmate, black has this very nasty bishop captures on h4 move, where checkmate is prevented, the rook stops queen g7, and also you cannot capture the bishop due to rook g8, and yeah, that's pretty much what happens here. So after knight a5, Magnus played queen to g4, the move that the engine says it's not so impressive, but Duda sort of fell apart here after Magnus's queen to g4 move, and it's not easy to spot why. Of course, bishop captures on h6 is now the threat as the g-pawn is pinned. So Duda plays king to h8, and now Magnus tricks him, queen to h5. And the question is, what do you play here? There's only one good move for Duda, and it's not an easy one to find. Duda spent almost 2 minutes trying to figure it out. He missed. You try. Have at it. Try and save the game for Duda while I give you a couple of seconds. So the only move that saves the game for Duda is queen to e8. It's sort of a silly looking way of stopping bishop captures on h6, but if it works, you know, it doesn't matter how silly it is. Now if bishop captures, you will play pawn to f6 and you will force a queen trade. That's all there is to it. And yeah, of course, it's easy to say now, but there's nothing better. You could go bishop e3, then, you know, black can choose to trade or not, or even bishop d2, knight b3, rook d1. Again, it's black that chooses what happens. Bishop b7, you can capture at any point. You know, just a very, very comfortable position for black. So instead, after queen to h5, Duda said, all right, I'm not allowing this to happen with check. I'm going back to g8, hoping that Magnus will just play queen back to g4, and then you're going to have a repetition. But no, now bishop captures on h6, and there is nothing Duda can do to defend. Captures, and Duda plays knight captures on c3. The key difference here than in the other lines that we've shown is that c6 has not been played, and rook to a7, well, you're just too slow with this plan. And if you try pawn to f5 nonetheless, then you play knight captures on d5, and after e captures, queen g6 check, king h8, and now knight to f4. Again, similar to the line that we've discussed, but not quite. Pawn to c6, yes, you will try it, but now knight to h5, threatening checkmate, and now there is no bishop captures on h4, as this would just be checkmate, so you can play rook to g8, then queen to h6 is checkmate, and pretty much everything else you play will also be checkmate. You can prolong the game a little bit with some rook f6 nonsense, but, you know, playing against Magnus and playing a move like this, that's worse than spitting in his face, I would say. So after queen captures on h6, knight captures on c3, Duda hoping that Magnus maybe captures the rook, then maybe some knight e2 check, and c6 you know, trap the bishop, because it's not just that the knight is coming to g5, also bishop to e4 will be very, very annoying. So b captures on c3, and now bishop to b7, countering the bishop, so bishop to e4 will not be as powerful, but now just bishop captures on b7, knight captures on b7, and knight to f4, and he was in this position on move 20 that Jan-Krzysztof Duda resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. It looks like there should be something. I mean, you don't have knight g6, what, knight h5, and queen g7 is that strong. In fact, it is. There is no way to prevent this from happening. If you go something like rook e8, knight h5, and then something like bishop to f, or yeah, you can't play bishop to f6, you just capture it. But even if bishop to f8, you just play knight f6 check, and now the king has no squares. You have to give up the queen, and okay, I mean, still you're not gonna play this against Magnus. That would be just silly. And after knight f4, if you try advancing the pawn to f5, again, pretty much anything, queen g6 check, or even just knight captures on e6 gets the job done. Either the queen falls or you get checkmated. That's it. That's game over. So yeah, beautifully played by Magnus. Again, finding poison where no one thought to look for poison, you know, before. Just pawn to h4 here, and after a couple of quick moves, you know, this knight g5, knight h3, the f4 maneuver, you know, just completely deadly. You know, just beautiful. Knight g5, knight h3, knight f4, and now resigns at the threat of knight to h5. So beautifully horsing around as usual. Magnus won this game, and the other three were drawn, and Magnus took down Duda in this wonderful match of the Champions Chester 2025. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry if I'm showing you know, a couple of shorter games lately. It's just that, you know, they're playing them, so I'm gonna show them. But you know, yeah, we're not gonna do this forever. At some point, I'm gonna show you a 50 move or a 60 move game with you know, 20 deep engine lines that will last for half an hour. So you know, you will get your fix. No worries. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Douglas Van Banhuisen, Samuel Kamuli, Nidil Kumar, Marcus Shib, and Mariusz Klimek for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.